The first time I saw Pastor Michael's hand shake during communion, I thought it was the weight of his calling. Now I know it was the weight of his desire. For me, I've been attending Riverside Baptist for 3 months. Drawn initially by the promise of community, my mother insisted I needed it after my father's death. What I found instead was Michael Harrison, 28, newly ordained, with eyes like storm clouds and a voice that could make scripture sound like poetry. He had a wife, pretty, devoted Sarah with her pressed dresses and perfect smile. He had a congregation that hung on his every word. He had everything a man of God should want, everything except the truth of what consumed him in the dark hours between prayers. It started innocently enough. Bible study sessions that ran long, just the two of us parsing verses about love and sacrifice. His hand would brush mine reaching for the same passage, and I'd catch his breath hitch. He'd pull away like he'd been burned, apologizing to a God who already knew his thoughts. David, he said one evening in October, my name falling from his lips like a confession. I think perhaps you could find another church for your spiritual growth. I should have left then. Should have walked away from the tremor in his voice, the way his knuckles went white, gripping the edge of his desk. Instead, I stood and moved closer, watching his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Is that what you want, Pastor? I asked, close enough now to smell his cologne mixed with the desperation he tried so hard to hide. His eyes closed. What I want and what's right. I kissed him then, soft and tentative, tasting the war between his faith and his flesh. For a moment, he melted into me, his hands fisting in my shirt like I was salvation itself. Then he jerked away, stumbling backward into his bookshelf, sending volumes of theology crashing to the floor. Get out, he whispered, but his eyes were pleading with me to stay. Please, just get out. I went, but I came back the next evening and the next. Each night, I'd find him in his office, wrestling with scripture and losing. Each night, we'd dance closer to the edge of something that would destroy everything he'd built. The first time we made love was in December, snow falling outside the church windows like benedictions. He'd been preparing his Christmas sermon, passages about God's love spread across his desk. When I arrived, he didn't tell me to leave this time. Instead, he looked up with eyes full of anguish and need. I've prayed, he said, his voice broken. I've prayed until my knees bled, but I can't stop wanting you. We moved together like we were drowning, desperate and reverent. He touched me like I was sacred, whispering my name against my skin, like it was the only prayer that mattered. In the darkness of his office, surrounded by the symbols of his faith, we found something holy in our sin. For 3 months, we lived in that space between devotion and destruction. By day, he preached about righteousness and redemption. By night, he came to me with communion wine on his breath and God's name dying on his lips as I worshipped him with my body. I learned every prayer scar on his knees, every line of shame around his eyes. He learned the geography of my desire, mapping it with the same careful attention he gave to Scripture. We were each other's salvation and damnation, bound together by love and doomed by the same. The end came in March, sudden as a lightning strike. Sarah found us. Michael bent over his desk, my hands tangled his hair, both of us lost in the kind of ecstasy that felt like speaking in tongues. Her screams shattered the sacred space we created, brought the fluorescent lights buzzing back to life, harsh and unforgiving. I ran. Like Peter before the cock crowed, I ran and left him to face the destruction alone. The scandal moved to the congregation like wildfire through dead grass. Michael resigned in disgrace, his wife filing for divorce before the week was out. The church board met an emergency session, their righteous anger a living thing that consumed everything in its path. I tried to see him once. After, found him drunk in his empty house, still clutching his Bible like it might offer some absolution for what we'd done. He looked at me with eyes full of hatred. For himself, for me, for the God who'd made him this way. I loved you, he said, the word slurred but sincere. I loved you more than my own soul. I know, I whispered. I love you too. He laughed then, bitter and broken. Love? This wasn't love, David. Love doesn't destroy everything it touches. I wanted to argue, to tell him that what we'd shared in those stolen hours was the closest thing to divine I'd ever experienced. Instead, I watched him disappear into the bottle that would claim him 6 months later, his liver finally failing like his faith had. They found him on a Tuesday, alone in that empty house with his Bible open to Romans, the passage about God's love for the unlovable, about grace that covers even the worst of sins. His funeral was small, a handful of distant relatives. His ex-wife who came out of duty rather than love, and me, standing in the back like a shadow of everything he'd lost. I still think about those nights sometimes, when sleep won't come and the loneliness feels like prophecy. I remember his hands shaking as he led communion. The way he'd look at me from the pulpit with eyes full of desperate love. He was right about one thing. What we had did destroy everything it touched. But it was still love. Flawed and forbidden and fatal, but love nonetheless. And in a world where love is rare enough, maybe that's its own kind of grace. Maybe God understood that better than either of us ever did.